Hello everyone, this is update for June 15, 2024, day 843 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for June 14 and 13. As you can see, I'm going to start with macroeconomic update and then I'm going to switch to the more strategic general update. And then we're going to do a quick walk through the battlefield in Ukraine. So first, I'm gonna provide a little bit more information on the situation in the U.S. I mentioned before that labor market seems to be cracking or sort of getting in worse shape in the U.S. and there are first signs. I'm not saying that this is definite situation. It's still kind of hazy, but Um, but there was statistics that came out from the U.S. and on the job data, specifically continuing jobless claims. As you can see, it got over 1.8 million, which is first sign that absorption or laid off individuals is not happening. And then the other one that's important and showing signs of initial signs of the problem is initial jobless claims. So the way I would the best way to kind of understand mechanics of this system, how it works. So people get laid off, and that's reflected in initial jobless claims, and then while they stay unemployed, that is reflected in continuing jobless claims. So basically, initial they they are converted in continuing for some period of time, whatever it is. So the spike in initial then is getting translated to continuing, and if job market is in good shape, there is a lot of hiring, then this initial layoffs they quickly absorbed, and then you don't see high continuing jobless number. And So here we don't have definite, as I said, it's not sort of clear cut picture, but there is definitely indication that things are getting worse. And First, there is a spike in initial jobless claims or initial sort of laid off individuals. So prior week number was 229. This week was 242. This is seasonally adjusted. I would say more telling is actually not seasonally adjusted NSA. So this is raw data as it is, not massaged by anyone. And here, it's not even the number because 229, 234, or 235 is sort of not far away. The more um, the indicator that things are really something is going on is this jump in the number. As you can see, it's 38.5 thousand, and that's pretty big jump and driven by mostly these states. One is the first one is California. As you can see, it's a huge jump. It's almost a quarter of this number is essentially due to California, which obviously not representing quarter of labor force in the U.S. So there is very clear that there are significant layoffs happening in California, probably related to the minimum wage law that was, I think, passed recently there, but I could be wrong. Then there is significant amount of layoffs in Minnesota, as you can see. Also, significant spike relative to the size of the state. It's a pretty small state, and having such a significant number again, something is very specific to Minnesota is happening there. Then there is significant spike in Pennsylvania, in Illinois, and then even Texas and Florida, two sort of job growth engines. They also showing signs of the problems. So as you can see, this is not just California story or something going on in Minnesota, but in some ways it's all major economic engines, even sort of the best ones in the US, such as Texas and Florida, showing unhealthy signs. So this, while it may look initially okay, it's really driven by this situation in California, but it looks like it's actually broad based, and this is, as I stated, initial spike. So it remains to be seen if this is going to continue next week and the following week. So this is just was some kind of strange one off, but definitely things are not going in sort of right direction in the U.S. job market. Now let's switch to the situation in Europe, and there things also predictably going in the wrong direction. And the first sign is industrial production. It's down 3% in April year on year. Prior number was negative 1.2. So as you can see, the negative trend is accelerating, and this is becoming really meaningful number and very problematic going forward. Again, this is going back to what I mentioned many times here. This war on conventional energy, which destructive to the production manufacturing capacity of the European Union, and obviously this probably significantly driven by Germany in this case. Then also, if we look at inflation in Europe, it actually a little bit jumped up from, if we take look at France, from 2.2 to 2.3. Again, this is a sign that inflation is not under control. And what I mentioned before, when European Central Bank decided to reduce its interest rate, it wasn't driven by the fact that inflation is under control, but it's more driven by the overall situation in the financial sector, where end consumer and business, where they cannot handle the level of interest rates that ECB set, and there is high probability of cascading defaults, bankruptcies, and so on, which will obviously can impair and destroy banking systems. So as you can see, the primary goal of all of the central banks is to protect banking system. It is first goal, even though the formal goals are stated as controlling inflation, or controlling, in case of US, controlling inflation and keeping up employment. The real actual true goal of all of the central banks is to protect banking system, banks, because it's essentially banking system lobby. It represents banking system, so therefore that's what the first priority of any central bank, and which we see very clearly in case of European Union. Now I'm going to switch a little bit to more strategic updates and what's going on with China and the US. I mentioned before that there is this escalation ping pong that's been going on between the two countries. It continues. US sanctioned several Chinese companies that are exporting or supporting Russia in their war effort. That includes Poly Technologies, which is one of the major Chinese exporters of the weapons. The company is essentially a competitor of Narinko. So you can imagine that this is not just some kind of no-name, small-size company. It's let's say number two player in China. So that's a significant hit against sort of China. Then the U.S. sanctioned bunch of CNC manufacturers, which supplying CNC machines to Russia to enable a military production there. Even there was even there was even payment terminal manufacturer that was sanctioned. So there's pretty broad variety of companies that were sanctioned. This obviously is viewed as escalation by China. There is no question about it. And then what you can see on in that there is then aggressive rhetoric that's coming from the Chinese Ministry of Defense, stating there won't be any peace as long as there is independent Taiwan. And then there are animations shown to Chinese audience showing Chinese bombers, Han 6, I think that's the name of them, how they attack using missiles, US aircraft carriers and US ships. So it just kind of gives you an idea where this whole confrontation is going. And actually kind of shows the strategic idea of how China is seeing dealing with US advantage in terms of aircraft carriers, which I mentioned before. US is totally dominating China in terms of aircraft carriers. China simply not match and will not be matched in near-term future because it takes quite a bit of time to build aircraft carrier. They are match to the U.S. Navy fleet and sort of regular Navy ships, and actually outpacing U.S. But aircraft carriers are formidable power and extremely important. So going back to what the China is planning, they basically essentially want to destroy U.S. aircraft carriers with the help of missiles that will be launched from either mainland China or with the help of these bombers. So that's really the answer. Chinese answer is the hope that to destroy U.S. Aircraft carriers with missiles, and then regular Chinese Navy will be able to defeat U.S. Navy in sort of face-to-face combat, essentially, and block Taiwan and eventually capture Taiwan. So this is pretty sort of straightforward Chinese vision, Chinese plan on how they gonna overcome this situation. Now I'm gonna switch a little bit to the to Russia. I mentioned that U.S. Sanctioned Russian exchange. It's more like it's called Moscow exchange, and it's not specialized in one product, in let's say equities or fixed income. It's broad based, so it's essentially jack of all trades. So it was FX, was obviously equities, and probably there were some fixed income and so on. So basically, it does everything, but the most important part was obviously FX. So the Russia's answer to this. So first of all, in terms of before I go into the answer, the immediate effect is actually that the spread, the exchange spread between buying and selling US dollars and euros has widened. So what this really means that it become more expensive to end users, basically businesses and consumers, to buy and sell US dollars and euros. So they have to pay a higher, so essentially fee, which is extra cost on the Russian economy. And as you can imagine, that's almost a net negative for Russian economy because it increases expenses for no reason. And that's really the value of the exchange and why it's important and why it exists in developed countries, because it actually increases efficiency of the financial markets significantly and facilitates modern society. So the answer that Russian government decided to do is they basically decided to peg Russian ruble to Chinese yuan, and effectively through that way, then Russian ruble is pegged to US dollar and to euro, which is it's going to be very inefficient scheme. Not to mention that Russia is essentially subjugated to the whims of the Chinese central banks and Chinese economy. So that's clearly a very uncomfortable position for any independent country, and not to mention that really makes it possible for China to take economic advantage of Russia, or basically exploiting Russia, because they effectively providing window to the world at this point to Russia financially, and so this whole move is clearly significant blow to Russian economy, Russian financial system, and so on. And especially on the long run, that's going to be definitely significant sort of significant problem. Having said that, it doesn't mean that it's going to, destroy Russia's economy, force Russia to stop aggression against Ukraine. It's significant inconvenience, but Russia definitely will survive that. Let's put it this way, because Russia's economy is built um, to live without features of the modern world, sort of to survive in very sort of raw way, and so while it's definitely going to make life worse in Russia, Russia's society prepared to bear the course overall. In other news, there was this so-called peace conference, and then offers peace offer by Russian president. I would say that both sides are clearly not serious and not really interested in what they stating they doing. And in case of Russia, there was a clear message that there was a last offer to Ukraine. And going forward, Russia is planning to completely annex Ukraine as a country. So Ukraine as a country will cease to exist. That's the message. This so-called peace offer was rejected, and for good reasons, because it wasn't peace offer. It's essentially opportunity for Russia to regroup and prepare for next move to sort of deal final blow to Ukraine, because Ukraine without these territories, it's not viable country, first of all, and this whole strategy that Russia is pursuing with respect to Ukraine is exactly what Russian Empire did to Poland in the 18th century, where there were three partitions of Poland. The most important were first one and the second one. Of the third one was just you know basically there was nothing left out of Poland, so it was really easy. The last one, the most difficult one was first one. Russia. It took Russian Empire uh, quite a bit of time to sort of chew up what they acquired during the first one, and then the second one was sort of the final blow, and just the third one was a really clean up of whatever was left over. So. Going back to the modern day in the situation with Ukraine, this is exactly what Russia is pursuing. So the current situation is that first partition of Poland, which I believe was 1772, and then 20 years later, there was the second one in 1793, and then the final 1794. So even from a timing perspective, you can see how it took 20 years between the first and the second one, and it took just 2 years between the second and third one, because at that point Poland was not viable country. And so the same is going to happen with respect to Ukraine, except it's not going to be 20 years. It's going to be 3, 4 years, 5 years at most. And then there will be sort of second one and final. I don't think there's going to be third one in case of Ukraine. It's just going to be the final sort of blow. So that's Russia's strategy. Very simple. There is nothing, how to say, hidden. It's all in plain sight. The problem of Ukraine is that under current leadership, it has no chance of successfully defending its independence. Basically, the cost for the West is getting too high and extremely, exceedingly high, and Russia understands that. And what Russia is trying to do is to force West's hand to kind of, basically cut the losses and move on. And that's really also very straightforward Russia strategy. And having Ukrainian leadership that's completely incompetent is helping Russia with its strategy, because it's going to be proving, it's going to be sort of, it's going to get proven over time again and again that Ukrainian leadership, political obviously, is not capable of defending Ukraine. And so eventually that will lead to the internal voices in many Western countries uh, to drive political decisions, which we're already seeing that this is happening in Germany, in France, where there is strong pressure to stop the war or have some kind of ceasefire at any cost in Ukraine, regardless what's going to happen in the immediate future, because it's basically the pain. There's obviously significant cost related to supporting Ukraine in the West, and that's being exploited internally in most of the Western countries. That the decline in the living standards that's being observed over past, let's say, 3-4 years in the West is simply because of the war in Ukraine. And if the war in Ukraine stops, things somehow will get better, and then we all, going to get happy, and it's going to be 2019 back again, which is it's obviously false. The real sort of story why the living standards are declining is really related to war on traditional energy, and that's really the driver for the entire decline in the living standard for the most part. Yes, there is something that's related to Ukraine, but it's relatively minor part relative to this war on traditional energy. And I would even want to say that West will not be able to carry these two things at once. So something will have to get dropped eventually. This is not, it's not being realized by, let's say, political top in the West, but eventually it will be very clear. It's either um, containing Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, or switching to this so-called green energy, which is not going to happen anyway. So even, let's say, West decides to, okay, let's drop Ukraine, let's have a sort of ceasefire with Russia and China, let's pursue this so-called green energy to the max, that will fail as well. It's just going to take a little bit longer, a little bit more time, but that will fail as well. So it will be, failure on both fronts. Let's put this way. And that's the biggest question for the West, where what's going to be the sort of final decision with respect to all of this. So that is biggest question. Let's put this way. Now let's do quick walks through the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, which really did not change that much. One thing I actually want to mention is that Russian president mentioned that they have Russia has roughly 700,000 soldiers on the front line in Ukraine at this point. So this is jump up from I think roughly 600 that were mentioned a couple months ago. So as you can see, Russian military got some boost, and probably most of that boost went to Kharkiv area, and that's what was the fuel for the Russia's attack northeast of Kharkiv, which at this point completely stalled, and Russia's situation military-wise is also not extremely comfortable, and that's probably one of the reasons also why Russia's president offered basically ceasefire. It's not truly peace the way it's being presented. It's really ceasefire. Just take a breath for the new sort of move. Is because Russia does not have enough manpower for a decisive attack or decisive blow in Ukraine that will lead to decisive resolution. The reason I'm saying this is because Russian military is roughly 1.1 million soldiers, and I'm not talking about the sort of administrative fluff. That's another roughly 800,000 people or more, or 900,000 people, but the actual troops that can fight. And Russia already has 700,000 out of 1.1 million. Maybe they can throw another 100 for sure. 200 is very unlikely, but that's pretty much it. And this 100,000 is not gonna, solve anything. Yes, that will lead to even some more Ukrainian losses, but those territorial losses, but they're gonna be very marginal losses. And even 200 is not gonna do much. The loss is gonna be a little bit bigger, but again, this is all gonna be marginal relative to the resources expended by Russia. So in some way, Russia is kind of, or Russian Russian political top is kind of caught between the rock and a hard place, because all this really means that Russia needs to do another round of mobilization. And there were some polls in Russia that were saying that this mobilization is extremely unpopular. So essentially, that's what Russia's political top facing. Which sort of path it will take remains to be seen. One thing is very clear, actually, in Russia that, and this is anecdotal, that there is significantly increased activity in attempting um, to recruit new soldiers. By that I mean that people are that in financial incentives significantly increased for people to join Russian army, and to the point that initial bonus increased to like $10,000 to $13,000, which is a meaningful number in Russia, and the monthly salary is now almost $2,500. So used to be $2,000. So it's not, obviously it's not a significant increase, but it's pretty meaningful. And given that if you need to get another 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers, the financial expense is pretty high. It's not something not meaningful, because you're talking about 100,000 of people, and the actually it has effect on civilian economies. So Russia has a program where they subsidize essentially purchase uh, of apartments, of the houses, and so on for the civilians. So that program that was subsidizing uh, uh, is getting sort of stopped effective July 1st, because there is not enough resources, there is not enough money to support that, because all of that needs to be channeled into the war effort. So as you can see that slowly but surely, um, Russia's economy becoming more and more militarized, and as the war progresses, this probably will continue. So again, going back to all of this, the biggest question is, will Russia's political top decide to do this mobilization, or they sort of will continue the things the way they are? If they continue, they probably won't. There won't be much sort of success or progress of Russian troops, which will create even more pressure on Russian political top. You know what to do, because this war continues in the long run. It will create quite a bit of damage for the Russian economy um, and for the life of average Russian. Just simply from a perspective of Russian population is going to get tired of it. So again, the path is not sort of comfortable or clear for the Russian political top. In case of Ukraine, the situation is obviously, I would say, disastrous. There's no question about it. There is significant resentment among Ukrainian population towards Ukrainian political top. It's and that rift is gonna go bigger as things sort of progress, and as things not gonna go well for Ukrainian for Ukraine on the front line generally. Um, in terms of actually Ukrainian economy, and there are signs of significant problems coming up, and they are related to the destruction of the power generation in Ukraine, and to some extent power distribution, energy power distribution. Energy distribution network. So due to them, Due to the shortage of electricity, a lot of producers cannot keep the costs low, as you can imagine. So there are already announcements from many manufacturers of just common food products like bread, milk, and so on, that they're gonna increase prices between 15 to 30%, which, as you can imagine, one-off increase is pretty significant, and that doesn't mean that the increase stops. So, as I mentioned before, Ukrainian economy, or whatever was left of Ukrainian economy, is gonna continue to completely disintegrate in towards the end of the year as situation with electricity deteriorates. And effectively, the message from Ukrainian political top to Ukrainian society, Ukrainian population, is survive on your own. We cannot help you with anything. It's your personal problem. And that's why I mentioned that there is significant resentment, and that resentment is going to only grow as economic problems are going to mount. And very clearly that Ukrainian political top is not willing to do even basic things to help Ukrainian population. So there's simply a very clear separation and sort of different interests between general population and the ruling class, political ruling class in Ukraine. Now I'm actually going to jump to the situation on the battlefield. So first, situation northeast of Kharkiv. Things really don't change effectively much. Pretty much the front line more or less stabilized without much changes in either direction. Ukraine forces attempting to a little bit counterattack, put some pressure on Russian troops. I mentioned before that the Ukrainian forces managed to liberate center of Vovchansk, but so far that's pretty much it in terms of successes on the Ukrainian side here. Now let's look at the situation on the North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here remain more or less the same without any significant Russian advances this time. Doesn't mean that that's not going to happen in the coming sort of days and weeks, but so far the front line remains stable. With the typical areas of Russia's pressure is along this road towards Kupiansk, and then the other one is in the Serebransky forest here in the south. Now let's move to the North Donbass section of the front line. Things here also in the northern sector more or less the same. Russia's attacks against this village Bilogorivka without really meaningful advances or success there. Generally, frontline here more or less stable. Some minor advances by Russian troops, like 100, 200 meters, but there's nothing truly meaningful here. The situation in the southern part of this front line also remains more or less the same. Russian troops essentially bogged down in their attempt to capture Tsiviyar. So, as I mentioned before, simply Russian troops don't have enough in numerical advantage here from all perspectives, and the situation is also not straightforward in terms of terrain, in terms of sort of simply geography. So it's probably going to take them much longer than expected in attempting to capture Tsiviyar, and I would say much more resources are needed and will be expended by Russian side to capture it. Now from that perspective, we can say that that situation here is temporarily stabilized. But the key word here is temporarily. It doesn't mean that it's generally stable and Ukrainian troops are able to hold on to the ground. Generally, it just the the situation, the terrain, and everything on the Russian side is extremely unfavorable and stacked against attacking Russian troops. So they need to overcome additional problems, not just resistance of Ukrainian troops here. This is general situation around Chasiv Yar. There are some reports that this bridgehead, Russia's bridgehead on the western side of the channel was destroyed, but the whole idea remains true. Is that Russian troops are attacking along this road T0504, sort of basically south of Chasiv Yar, and then the same idea, they want to attacking across this channel north of Chasiv Yar to create basically semi-encirclement and force Ukrainian troops out of Chasiv Yar. So basically, very straightforward strategy here. Now let's move to the central Donbass section of the front line. Things here are so far there are no meaningful Russian advances since last time, but there were significant ones last time. So it was confirmed that Novoalexandrivka is effectively in Russians' hands. Ukrainian troops just holding on to the western outskirts of Novoalexandrivka, meaning essentially that Ukrainian troops lost Novoalexandrivka. There is fighting going on for this village Sokil. Russian troops did not manage to actually capture this village, and it's basically fighting is happening in the village. Russian troops did manage to capture Novopokrovsky, and they are attacking towards this Novoselivka Persha. So those are main kind of key areas of tension on this section of the front line. And then the other one is this Russian advances west of Netailova in the direction of Kharkivka, but sort of no new advances since last time there. This is just the big picture of the whole section of the front line. Russian troops are still sort of stuck and going through Krasnohorivka. That looks like it's going to take some time for them. They're moving forward at the slow pace west of Marinka without truly meaningful advances that are really worth showing. The same situation here west of Novomikhailivka. Essentially, the Russia's advances are stalled here. Again, this is all temporary situation. Doesn't mean that the front line truly stabilized by Ukrainian forces. Now let's look at the situation on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here somewhat quieter. Still Russian pressure in Staromayorsky Oruzhaine area. Basically, Russian troops are advancing along this river here that I'm showing on the both sides of the river. Essentially, they're moving up north slowly but surely. Just the typical situation where Ukraine forces slowly losing territory, essentially. Then there's nothing major going on in this Robotina area. It does look that Russian command pulled all of its resources in the area west of Avdiivka. So there is definitely less pressure on Zaporizhya front line. And then let's have a look at the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here also somewhat stable. I would say this is obviously my speculation, but it feels that the Russian command has pulled some resources from here as well to the area west of Avdiivka. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.